And we're on. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Draw and Chat. I'm your host DJ Gomita with my co-host right now, Gurinka. And today
Hello.
is Fraser, MacLean, artist coordinator, intern, movie Disney, and technical supervisor and on Space Jam and for Warner Brothers, and sketch
Woo.
artist and teacher. So, how you doing, Fraser?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for inviting me to take part. If I start coughing, maybe I know what I'll do. I have chewing gum. This will try and prevent me from inhaling any more dust and having any more coughing fits while there's a live audience. So thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's really nice to see you guys.
Thanks.
There you go. Now I'll be making terrible mouth sounds into the microphone. Sorry.
So then,
Yeah,
so
just
Fraser, you I told you, and then you're right, buddy. Yeah. Nah,
sorry.
it's okay. You need to keep your throat fresh. So that's okay.
I've got that and some cold coffee. That'll do. One or
Go,
one or the other will do.
nice.
That could be like the title of the autobiography: chewing gum and cold coffee.
Yeah.
¿Cómo se? Recipe for success. Yeah. So how you doing, man? Besides the cold brew and
I'm
the
fine.
coffee.
Yeah. I have you to thank for well, actually, you and the work that I'm doing here online to thank for making me buy and try and get to grips with the tablet technology. I've been stubbornly sticking to traditional methods, and I'm not sure that I have an excuse any longer to stay away from it. Oh, what's this? Isn't You have
Yeah,
such an
well,
instantaneous way of catching me at my worst.
well, you mean like that you have like this easy. Well, for me, it's easy to draw. You're easy to remember.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm sure that I will take that as the compliment that I'm sure it's meant to be.
Okay. So, wait, could you tell us something about yourself, like
Let
where
me
you
just add a
from?
layer. Can I add a new layer on this?
Yes,
Where
of
do I
course,
go
of
to add a
course.
new layer?
Yes.
What do I hit to add layer?
Okay, let me explain you. Yes.
The icon.
There's an icon here. I don't know if you can see it here.
Looking at two different screens.
Yes,
That one there.
that one there. Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's where you
That's
can add some.
So
And
okay.
you have like, if everyone is watching, you can add like some blending option, like for
Hmm.
shading and lights.
Okay.
And this is for the opacity. You
Okay.
want to this, and with this, if you click this box, you can like block the wherever you draw,
Hmm.
but you can like mask.
Okay.
You can do this. So this is really really helpful.
Oh, that looks good. All your
And
stuff looks automatically good on this, and I just look like a half
I,
asleep child in a sandbox.
I have like I have more time practices with this, man.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's enough of a comfort to me. I'm going for the easy tools here. I'm going for the piece of string tool here.
That's why we are here for this podcast to
Yeah, it's
teach
just
you to teach everybody how to use the Aggie
how
and
how not
technology.
how not to use the technology.
Oh, we have our first hi, Alexis Rueda Huitrón. Saluda a la bandera,
Hi
Fraser.
Alexis, how are you doing? Hi, good to see you. I hope we get to sketch together in person soon again. That would be
yeah.
amazing.
That's cool.
Alexis is doing really beautiful work, putting some fantastic stuff up on Facebook.
Oh, nice.
Nice. What?
Oh,
Ah.
and talking about that, our doodle topic from today is all about urban sketching or just
Mhm.
doodling.
Right, this is
And
me. Oh, urban sketching. Yeah, okay.
urban,
So
yeah, yeah.
this is me. I'm trying to build an architectural model of you. Okay.
Ah.
Cool.
Which is probably not going to be as complimentary or stylish as your one of me. Okay.
Yes, you have make my white face. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
that's the whole thing.
That's a good
Yes,
start.
yes. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Mustache and yeah. You capture really my whole face. I
Oh,
think I have like
weird.
this trapezoid shade, or maybe
Well,
pentagon.
even if that's what you have if that's not what you have in nature, it's what you've got now.
This is what I am.
just for the purposes of this live stream. Okay, let's see if we can do this.
Okay, well, so
Oops.
tell us more about yourself, Fraser. Who
Well,
are you, Fraser?
who am I? What am I?
What is a Fraser?
What is a Fraser? Well, a Fraser literally, if you go to the root of the name, is taken from the French word for strawberry or fresa. So if it was my clan name rather than my given name, if you go to the castle in Scotland for the clan Fraser, the emblem in stone over the door is three strawberries. And I don't
Oh,
know
wow.
whether historically this is because this was a clan that had red hair, or I mean that would fit me, but I'm I'm not. My family name is MacLean, which is son of the battle axe, and there's all kinds of if you're tracing down through what is a Fraser. But yeah, here in Jalisco, that's not a very complimentary thing. Fraser is much more of it's a bit more of an insult than anything else.
Yes.
So
Like
yeah,
Kind of does.
yeah, it's a little bit more. What's the word? Oh no, hold on a second. I've got. How do I change the maximum size on my brush?
Oh, yeah. You go to here on the brush settings. It is where in size, and you can move this bar. Do you see this?
I don't know where I'm looking. Where are you?
Oh, here. I'm right here. This place.
I hear the word here, and I don't see your cursor. Where?
We're going through here. Do you
He
see
needs
this?
to see the streaming.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the really
StreamYard.
That's the
tiny.
size. Yes.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
the small. In here, you can move the size of your brush.
Well, yeah. According to you, I can, but here it's giving me a 10 pixel limit.
10?
What? 10?
If I go
Just
to
be-
size on my brush, the maximum I'm allowed to go to is 10 pixels.
Should be.
That shouldn't be. It should be like
So do I change one of these things at the side, or do I?
the size.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so yeah, that's what it
Size.
is.
It should be like higher, well, like
Yeah, there we
100.
go. Yeah. So it's this thing here that I'm switching on and off, the little brush symbol. So that, yeah. Okay,
Except
so let's.
it changes.
Right.
Second, that's the one.
So I'm going between the mouse and the pen. Can you believe that when I started working computers in 1993, I was drawing with a mouse? Actually, physically, every day drawing with a mouse.
But what?
Well, we didn't have pens and tablets to work with. It was extremely primitive.
Those were the days.
No, it was horrible. It was terrible. I don't recommend it to anybody. It's but yeah, your question was much more like, why do I draw, or why am I in the animation industry? Yeah.
How do you get in the animation industry?
What am I doing on this live stream if I can't draw?
No.
Well, I got into the animation industry kind of slowly, because in the 1980s, I was an art student from 1979 to 1983. So I started out when I was 18 and I finished when I was 22. And there just was the only time I would hear Disney's name, for example, it was being used as an insult. Like if you were saying something was like Disney, it was entirely negative and pejorative. And people were very rude about anybody wanting to animate it, or it just wasn't art if it was commercial. There's this kind of suspicious thing that if enough people like it, then you must be selling your soul. It can't be real art if there's a popular audience for it. But all the things that I was really interested in, and all the things that I thought were worth paying attention to, were kind of in popular culture. But the contradiction was that when went to art college, I wanted to, and this is where everybody's going to start laughing or tune out altogether. I wanted to learn to draw and paint like a Renaissance artist. I wasn't interested in trying to be hip or cool, or I just wanted to be able to draw like, you know, my heroes that were Diego Velázquez or Leonardo or Michelangelo or these people. And I just kept being told that's over. There's nobody wants that or needs that any longer. Even in the field of commercial illustration, you have to have a style and you have to have an attitude, and it has to be edgy and cool and dangerous and this, that, and the other. So, you know, I did what you do under those kinds of pressures, and I started trying to make my work look edgy and cool and dangerous, and it just didn't look like it. Just looked like it looked like shit, basically. So I just thought, well, you know, I still trusted my instinct that there had to be still a good reason to want to draw like the ancient masters. And I kept doing it. I stopped showing it to my tutors. I was in the department of graphic design, and I just got into trouble every time that I showed them any of those drawings. And so I just stopped showing. I didn't stop doing them, but I stopped taking them into the tutorials. And I began working on video because I was really interested in moving image. I was interested in film. I was interested in I'm completely cheating with this. I'm just using the straight line tool because it's fun. So I started making some really dreadful music videos. That was seen at the time as being the pathway into getting work in the movie industry. If you wanted to, it was. I was at university in the kind of grey historical period between Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody and MTV. So music video was really in its infancy, and you know we referred to it then as pop promo. It was called pop promotional video. It wasn't even under the heading of music video at the time, and you know I was working on a format of tape called U-matic, which was huge. It was like a 1-inch videotape. And I was trying to do, you know, my own little storyboards and things, and work within the what I thought were the parameters of good practice for preparing stuff and doing the designs for the sets and the makeup and things like this. And I would choose narrative songs by my favorite musicians and try and illustrate them in video. And you know, that went okay, but it wasn't really a gateway to anything in Scotland, because Scotland had an absolutely tiny movie and TV industry, and the people that were controlling the money that went into filmmaking were only interested in funding the same 2 projects every year. So you could do either a light-hearted comedy or a hard-hitting left-wing polemic where, you know, all rich people are awful and all poor people are heroes and the world is a terrible place. And I had zero interest in either of those. But I, like, you know, nope. Yeah, it was just like, why would there is nothing remotely interesting to me about either of those things, and it just felt, oh, how did I manage to zoom in when I didn't want to zoom in?
With the button Z.
No, I wanted to do that bit. No, that's not right. Okay. So I don't, why have I got the, oh, that's it.
Okay. If you have trouble, where is it? Yes. This button helps you to put straight the size of the zoom-in canvas. Yes.
Okay.
I think this is
okay.
it.
Yes.
Yeah. Close.
So the other problem for anybody in Scotland in the 1980s who wanted to get into the movie industry, and I have to be careful about this because I am very, very pro-union. Trades unions are there to protect workers' health and safety, to make sure that people are paid a living wage, to make sure that there's decent working conditions, that you're not working 18 hours a day and crashing your car on the way home and all that kind of stuff. However, during the 60s and 70s, there were one or two trades unions in the UK that went absolutely batshit crazy. And
Why? Well, how
um,
so?
oh, don't know, don't care. It was just a very
It's
unpleasant
just
period. It was just really, really horrible. And so there were 5 million people in Scotland at the time that I graduated. Do you want to guess how many people the trade union would allow into the film and television industries every year in a country of 5 million people?
oh my god, a few? Or
Three.
three?
Three.
Why is that? Well,
Well, I know it just doesn't make any sense, but
yes,
that was,
why?
but that was
It's like
the
like, do you want to kill the industry? Yes, of course.
yeah, or smother it before it's even alive. So can I? I've got a question. Is there a kind of gradation tool?
No, it doesn't have this. It just have like this small. Okay, if you go to brush setting and you go to hardness,
Yeah,
I don't know, here,
yeah,
you put it in 0%, and what you can do is lower the opacity,
yeah.
and with that you can start like making some gradients. I think like
Okay,
yes.
okay. Let's see if this works.
Yeah, what I do is just click here on the what, on the new palette that is called creator, and then here that's
Okay,
the
let's see
more
if this.
easy way to create a gradient colors.
Okay, so I had um, a visiting. So here's the thing. Also, the university or the art school had been given a gift of two um, stop motion 16 millimeter animation cameras. And if somebody gave you a gift of that today, then like the very first thing that you would do is go, hooray, this means that we can start teaching animation.
Yeah.
That was not their reaction at all. Their reaction was panic, scream, give both of them away to somebody else. And they gave one to the College of Art in Edinburgh, which is still sitting there gathering dust. And they gave the other one to the only student before me who had ever expressed an interest in animation. And basically, she wouldn't give it back. She was like, this is mine now, and anybody else that wants it, you'll have to come to my house to use it. And I had this big row with her and went, I'm not coming to your house to use equipment that belongs to my art school. Just how dare you?
Why?
Yeah. And then that same person, the year before I graduated, the UK got, I grew up in a world where there were only two television channels. And in 1982, we got three television channels. And in 1982, we got a fourth television channel called Channel 4. And its reason to exist was to encourage people that otherwise might not have had a chance to kind of marginalized groups to
Mm,
have a access to mainstream to something more in the mainstream to mainstream broadcasting. So there was a lot of very interesting stuff happening. There was a lot of really cool stuff going on, but density, opacity, 50. What am I doing with this? So I had a lot of work that was financed by or supported, but on projects that were from Channel 4. and I worked in current affairs and news. I trained. So here it goes. I'm not concentrating here. So the tutor who was supposedly coming in to help supervise an animation project for me in the final year, she got a commission from Channel 4 and she cleared off and took all the equipment with her the same way that she'd taken the camera. So I had nothing to work on. So I had this abandoned piece of plasticine animation, which consisted of a little character hobbling around a set and not getting very far, and very little else. And before she left, she said, look, if you're serious about wanting to get into the movie industry, there is a training scheme in Scotland which is called the Scottish Film Training Trust, and you can apply to be one of the 3 trainees for the 3 available places. So I applied to be and the only 3 areas that you could train in were to train to be a camera operator, a sound recordist, or a film editor. And when I'd been making my really crappy music videos, the technician who was in charge of the offline editing thing said to me, I'm really not here to do the work that you can't be bothered doing of itemizing all of the good takes in your tapes and deciding which point of the tape to go to for the material that we're going to edit. You have to arrive in the cutting room with all of that stuff already done. So basically, you've had your fun. You've done all the interesting stuff in pre-production. The rest of it is just the discipline of getting the thing onto the screen. And it's time and money, and you are not in a position to waste other people's time and money. And that was probably the first time within the environment of the art school that anybody had suggested to me that I had a responsibility to anybody other than myself. Because the only creative advice or the only career advice we were given was get famous.
Yeah.
And then you would kind of think, okay, get famous, right? And then what? Man, you are so far ahead of me on this. I look like I'm drawing with Lego. look at what you're doing, you bastard. That's great. So very quickly I began to think, well, I'm never going to be able to do animation or any of those things, but if the gateway into the industry is for me to learn film editing, then that's a place that I can go and learn, like, the boiler room of the filmmaking process. So the first few years that I was in the industry, I was in editing, and I went from picture editing to sound editing, and I moved to London at the invitation of a very, very crazy little animation company, little film company called Sands Films, where I worked on a 6-hour cinema movie. Today, it would have probably been like a mini series, but it was 2 3-hour films that you were expected to go to the cinema and sit for 3 hours through part 1 and 3 hours part 2. And it was based on a Charles Dickens book called Little Dorrit. And there was the BBC version years later with Anthony Serkis, but this was a version that had Alec Guinness playing the lead role that was based on Dickens' father. And he got sent to debtor's prison for non-payment of debts. And that's what happens to the character in the show. So I had Obi-Wan Kenobi walking through my cutting room every morning with a cup of coffee and a bacon roll. And I kind of thought, oh, this is great. I'm on the way to being a successful movie director, and this is my first step. And I thought I had to give up on the idea that I wanted to be able to draw or paint or anything, because the union would not allow you to learn how to be in any of the creative grades. You couldn't train to be a production designer or an art director or any of those things. You had the 3 choices: camera, sound, or editing, or go away, basically. So I didn't expect I was ever going to have an opportunity to combine my love of drawing with my desire to work in movies. And I just thought, well, you just got to get on with it. You've got to do whatever's available. And at the end of Little Dorrit, I went all the way up to Highgate to put my resume through Terry Gilliam's door, because he was getting ready to make Baron Munchausen. and I was working with the woman who was his makeup lady. And she said, "Oh, Terry would love you. You'd be a great guy to work on this movie." And thankfully, he never answered my call. I tried to get onto Fish Called Wanda. I tried to get onto another film called The Rat. I was trying everything, and nobody was interested in hiring me. But you had to go, and there was one newsagent in the centre of London that sold a magazine called Screen International, and it came out on a Monday morning, and I would go in at 6 a.m. on the tube every Monday morning to get my copy of Screen International. And one morning, while I was looking for editing jobs, there was a little picture of Mickey Mouse at a desk drawing, and it said Walt Disney are looking for, highly skilled, talented animation personnel to work on a movie that combines live action and animation. And I was like, I don't care what I have to do to get onto this project. I want to work on this film. And I didn't even occur to me to send them artwork because I'd had 3 years of being told that my drawings were shit. So I thought my best selling point was that I was already in London, I was already working in the movie industry, and I was working in film editing. So I wrote to them and I said, I'm really interested in whatever this movie is going to be, and I'd like to work in your cutting room. And I sat and waited for the reply, and I didn't get a reply. But back in the day, you could kind of do your homework and find out what the phone number was, even though it wasn't published. And I called up, and I got put through to this guy called Don Hahn. And I said, "Hello, yeah, I sent you a letter, and I was hoping that you might hire me for your cutting room." And nobody wrote back. And he said, "Well, the main reason we didn't write back is we really totally don't need anybody in the cutting room, dude." He's like, it's a tiny little cutting room, and it's an enormous production. So we don't. And while he was talking to me, he kind of got my resume out of the trash and said, "Hold on a minute. It says here that you spent 4 years at the art school in Glasgow. Can you draw?" And I said,
Yes, of
"Yeah,
course.
I can draw." And he said, "Have you got any, traditional drawings like classical figure drawing, perspective?" And I said, I've got a mountain of that stuff under my bed, but nobody has ever shown an interest in it." And he said, "Okay, well, do you know where Camden is?" So in North London, there's a neighborhood called Camden, and the Forum in Camden was the building where they had moved Dick Williams' studio from Soho Square and started this entirely new thing in the Forum for feature production. And he said, "Do you know where it is?" And I said, "Of course I do. I've been living in London, for the last 3 years, and I'm living down in Rotherhithe." And he said, "Is there a bus you can catch to?" So 2 hours later, after first of all being put through to Don Hahn, I was in his office, and all the drawings that I'd been told by my art school tutors were such shit got me hired by Disney. And so the rest of my career has been a gigantic fuck you to the art school that I went to in Scotland, which has now burned down twice. So like I care. It's a beautiful building that they should have been protecting with every resource available to them. And they weren't interested in enough even to put in a sprinkler system. So half of it burnt down to begin with. And while they were trying to work out what to do with the insurance money from that, they burnt it down a second time, and it's now, it eventually is going to have to be reconstructed, but God knows how and by whom. So yeah, I became part of the team of people who were adding all of the shading effects to all the animated characters to make them look three-dimensional. Because in movies like Mary Poppins or Bedknobs and Broomsticks, where they had previously tried to combine animated characters with
live action.
live action,
Yeah.
the way that they had got around the problem was to make the live action characters look two-dimensional by putting them in, there's always a parallel universe. So in Mary Poppins, they jump into a sidewalk chalk painting that's being done by the chimney sweep. And when they arrive in the magical realm, they're covered in chalk dust and they're wearing these really brightly colored costumes. And they're very heavily lit, so they look kind of two-dimensional. And they would never move the camera more than a few inches to the left or a few inches to the right because they didn't want anyone to change the perspective on each frame. And I just basically landed like a pig in shit. I was in exactly the right place because it was all the anatomy, lighting, composition, perspective skills that I had been perfecting to the disgust of my tutors in the graphic design department.
Why are you doing this?
And it was like, well, obviously there is an industry that still requires these skills. So today, in the context particularly of concept art and all these other things, these are still the absolute fundamentals that people need to be looking to develop.
Yes,
and yet the school system around the world has now had almost 50 years of neglecting encouraging young people and children to draw in lots and lots of different societies all around the world, and in many, many education systems. You are only allowed to draw in kindergarten, and when you get to the age of 6 or 7, the assumption is that it's a pre-literate skill, and that once you develop the ability to read, write, and count, well, you don't need to make pictures, do you? Because that's what children do, or it's what delinquents or people with nothing better to do.
That's for Banksy to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is the craziest bullshit on the go. I think people having a visual sensibility, this is why urban sketching is important. I did a book in 2011. That sounds like, I did a book in 2011. It took 3.5 years out of my life, but it came out in 2011 about animation layout. And most of the events that I was asked to go and talk about the book were animation festivals or whatever. But I got invited to talk about it at the Edinburgh International Book Festival. And I thought, this is interesting because I don't think anyone's going to turn up. Like, they have all these famous authors that come to this festival. And I thought, this is not the crowd that is going to have any interest at all. And sure enough, they had a shop in a square in Edinburgh, and they take this square over every year, and they have all these tents. And my talk was in one of the smaller tents, and it was next to the shop where they sell copies of the books. And nobody had bought a copy of my book. And I thought, I'm going to go in and there's going to be an empty tent and nobody will want to hear any of this. And the tent was packed, absolutely packed. And afterwards, they bought nearly all the copies of the books that were available, and people came up to get them signed at this little table. And the very last guy who was standing in line waiting to get his book signed, was an architect. And he said, can I buy you a beer? And asking anyone in Scotland if they can buy you a beer is like, it's the biggest ever question you can imagine. So I said, yeah. And I said, yeah, he said, I went to the same art school as you to study architecture. And we were actively told, that we were not allowed to draw because we were in an era where we were going to be using CAD or computer aided design. So that was a dead skill, and nobody was going to learn how to draw because this was the age of
technology and
the technology,
and you're going to be a professional.
Yeah, and it was all being run by the people who didn't realize that Le Corbusier
were all
the people who hadn't woken up to the fact that Le Corbusier was a sociopath, all that kind of stuff. So he said, would you be available to do some workshops for architects and urban planners? He said, because the knock-on effect of this conceit about observational drawing not mattering is that we now have a generation of architects and urban planners here in Scotland who cannot draw. And because they can't draw, they can't understand, they have no spatial awareness. because their only spatial awareness is from the computer, and the computer is creating your entire sense of three-dimensional space, and you don't actually perceive or record that three-dimensional space and turn it into a two-dimensional image. And ultimately, that means that you can't make useful two-dimensional designs that will turn into a livable three-dimensional space. So he said, this is a real crisis and we need to do something about it. So I started taking part in all these classes to try and encourage trainee architects and trainee urban planners also to learn how to draw, which they should have been doing all along. And a few years afterwards, going back in time, a few years before this, when I had been researching the book, which was all about layout, scenic design, cinematography, visual continuity, etc., for animated movies, I had to go to interview lots of artists at Pixar and DreamWorks and Disney, and I'd scheduled all of this very, very tightly and made all the appointments. So I flew to San Francisco, where I was going to be going out to Emeryville to spend several days interviewing people at Pixar. And the guy who met me at the airport was a friend of mine called Sean Eccles. And any of you who don't know his work, it's ECKOLS.net. And he's an amazing art director, production designer, concept painter, sculptor. And he met me off the plane and said, do you want to go on a sketch crawl? And I said, I don't know what a sketch crawl is. And he said, oh, well, there's a guy at Pixar called Enrico Casarosa. And he started this thing where everybody meets at the weekend and they get together and draw. And it was based on something that happened to him when he went to England for the first time. And he was taken on something called a pub crawl. And that's where you go to every pub on a particular street or every bar in a neighborhood. And you have a different drink in every bar. And by the end of it, you're crawling. So being a more cultured individual, Enrico said, well, surely we can do this for a sensible, productive, creative reason as well. Why don't we do a sketch crawl that doesn't have to involve alcohol, but everybody gets together in the morning and you have a coffee, and then in San Francisco, some people would go off and draw and paint in Chinatown. Some people would go down to the docks or the Presidio, and then everyone would get together in the evening and show one another their sketchbooks. So when I came here in 2019, I'd been trying in other countries and other places to encourage students to get out and sketch together, because a lot of the training for visual artists is you're alone. And, if a young child shows promise in sport, you find them a coach, you put them on a junior league team and they go out and compete. If a young person is good at music, you find them an instrumental teacher, they join an orchestra and they go out and perform. If a child survives daring to have the desire to want to carry on drawing after adults start saying, stop doing that, that's not, stop drawing in your school book, it's not real work. If they survive all of that awful cultural negative pressure and they have parents and people around them who will support them to develop their skill as a visual communicator, what do? They sit alone in their bedroom and wait to get famous. And I hate to break it to you, but Van Gogh never made a movie. So that model is a suck-awful model for trying to train people to be artists for video games or visual effects or animation or television or films, because films are made by teams.
Yeah.
And that for me was the great thing about arriving in Camden and getting to work on Roger Rabbit. I was part of a visual orchestra. We had the equivalent of the violin players, the percussion, that, there was kind of an equivalent to everything. And there were hundreds of us all collectively trying to make this beautiful movie. And it was like being part of the team that would build a cathedral or part of the team that would build a train or something. And it was a fantastic release from that relentless pressure to be Picasso or Frida Kahlo or Diego Rivera or be famous, be famous, be famous, be famous. The people that I was at art school with who became famous fashion designers or became famous painters or famous this, that, or the other, usually didn't end well. And the way that it ended usually involved drugs or alcohol or the breakup of a marriage and
They-
that to me didn't seem like an appealing set of career choices. I was like, if I'm
nah, it's
able
like
to stay in animation and do this, I'm a happy bunny, so does that answer your question?
yes, yes, of course. And it's like they were living like a rock star instead of building.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's actually a really inspiration story, that you learn these skills so you can work to build something great.
Yeah.
And what better to do it with a team? And even, well, no, I mean, the experience is different for everybody, but I mean, you learn that even if you hate people, that if you work together with other people, you can find some common ground with others.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And it's also a great thing because you quite often don't know who it is that you're going to be in a room with or on a production with. One of
Yes.
the guys that I worked with on Tarzan, who joined the 3D department, he said, "Oh, this is all very different to my last company." And I said, "What was your last company?" He said, "NASA."
Wait, what?
And I'm like, "Well, that's cool. Like, I'm a complete, dipstick, and I'm working on a production with these people that have worked at places like NASA, and that's amazing, to have that opportunity to mix with people that are from such a different perspective and have so many different things to offer. And yeah, I thought that was amazing. And people would often say, "Oh, I don't like American movies." And I would look around me at Disney and think, well, everybody in this room is from Ireland, Venezuela, Mexico, Scotland. Like, how American is this movie anyway? It's not. It's being made by a bunch of people from all around the world, because the whole reason to go to Disney to work on something is to be part of is to participate in excellence.
Yes.
And there was a whole series of conceits that went with the rise of the Marcel Duchamp crowd, which was that technical excellence is a kind of decadence. It's an old-fashioned thing that is dead and gone, and we shouldn't be encouraging it because there are bigger, more clever things that have happened more recently, and Marcel Duchamp is probably the most important person on the planet. And I think Marcel Duchamp produced some interesting stuff, but he also copied work by other people, pretended it was his. He's not an entirely loathsome character, but I wouldn't lend him my car keys. And the whole idea of it was the same with the punk movement in music in the 1970s. There's this spurious idea that technical ineptitude is a sign of authenticity.
Yes, but
And
yeah, but no.
yes, but no. I mean, not even temporarily yes, just permanently no.
No,
Um,
it's just like,
and, and I just don't buy any of that crap. And I'm perfectly happy for people to go along with it if that's what makes them, if that's what floats your
it's
boat, that's great. But I don't think the arrival of new things means that we have to exterminate all the old things to make way for them. I just think that's profoundly unwise, um, and damaging as well, because it takes away that sense of the coexistence of the old and the new and the respect for your ancestors. And it doesn't matter what line of work you're in, there are people who are your ancestors culturally and technically, and you kind of owe it to them and to yourself to be respectful of what they accomplished and why they did what they did. And I don't think it's helpful to create this situation where you're just constantly telling people that everything in the past was crap and everything that's new is wonderful. But that was a very big part of the kind of perception of it all at the time. And like I say, because I went off and this whatever success I achieved in the commercial sphere, the art school that I went to has never once invited me back to talk or to speak with their students or anything, and they still don't have an animation department, and they burned to the ground. So whatever.
Like we don't need this. Like
Yeah, we don't
yeah,
need this.
at the hell to them with them. So
All
hey,
right,
Fraser, no, I want to ask you another. Do you, beside the drawing, teaching, or what you do you have like what do you like to do besides all this your work?
Can I just say to everybody that's watching, what I'm doing up in the top left-hand corner is why, if you're looking for somebody to teach you artistic skills, you should be going to Ricardo. Not I. I absolutely hate working with this technology. It is like it's like trying to do ballet wearing ski boots. I have not developed the skills for this at all. If you want to see what my drawings really look like, you'll have to dig around online or on Facebook. Usually, I don't draw with a ruler and an airbrush, so all I can do is apologize. This is I'm a very, very bad advertisement for my own skills if this is the toolkit I'm using. Sorry,
No,
what
but
was the question? What else am I interested in?
yes, what do you like besides?
Well, I like not making
Fíjate,
not
está
not
quedando
making a
bonito.
not making a fool of myself in public. I love music. I really, really love music, and almost everything that I do here is is driven by the local music scene. I don't know if I can successfully hold anything up to the camera, but yeah. So these are. I just take a pen out and I draw people
Let
playing
me,
music.
here it is. I'm gonna, yes. You can check, yes. Here it is.
So whatever kind of instruments they're playing, whether it's this guy's playing two instruments at once, playing a saxophone and also playing a
There's a clarinet?
clarinet. Yeah, well, he wasn't really playing them both at the same time. It's a drummer friend of mine called Trino, and this is all sketching with just an office pen, and it's trying to record.
Nice.
It's like recording the music scene here in Guadalajara, which is extremely rich. And when we were doing the sketching sessions, you'll remember, Ricardo, we always had live music. So I would always be asking the musicians that I knew, whether they were classical musicians playing like a string quartet, or whether they were jazz, or whether it was blues or Balkan music, please could you come and play as an inspiration for the people getting together to draw on the weekends. So I think there's a huge connection and an important connection between music and animation, because they're both forms of storytelling, and they're both ways of making large numbers of people feel something and usually feel good about I'm not arguing that movies or animation or video games or music even should all be just about let's all feel happy and let's pretend that everything's all right with the world. But I think that in music and in animation, the power is there to connect and for things to resonate with an audience. And in the history of animation classes that I do, I'm always trying to remind people that I'm not expecting them to memorize all these dates from the past, like what was the year that the rotoscope was patented, or what. The reason that I want them to be interested in the history of animation is that they are part of it. That all these amazing studios and individuals here in Mexico, I know what Japanese animation looks like. I know what Disney animation looks like. I know what I want to know what Mexican animation looks like. And I see, Maya y los Tres, or I see Libro de la Vida, and that's like being inside Jorge Gutierrez and Sandra Ekiwa's heads. You get the opportunity to inhabit this entirely new aesthetic. And I think that's really exciting.
Yes.
And I feel really, really lucky to be here in Mexico while these new industries are just getting off the ground. And I was asked when I was at the Sublime Jalisco event in 2018, Dame Jesus, the guy who does all the stuff for Designare Media, who cover the Pixelatl events, kind of put me in front of this camera on a tripod and said, can you say a few words about, just tell us why, if you are in the animation industry, why you should take the time to come to Mexico. And I didn't have anything prepared in my head to say, but I just thought, okay. And I said, well, how many times have you heard somebody say, can you imagine if we could take a time machine and go back to Liverpool in 1963, just before the Beatles were discovered? And I said, that's what it's like being here. It's like you keep looking around thinking, man, everyone should be here to see this. Everyone should be here to see what's going on. And I think the sketching in the urban environment, I'm constantly saying to students that it's important, whatever area they're in, to sketch. Not because I say so, not because it's a requirement, not because it's a have-to thing, but because it allows you to discover the universe that is in your street or in your neighborhood. And a lot of people now, you know, I watched, the first time I came over here, I was asked to teach. I was asked to spend some time at Sci Mexico, and I'm working for Sci at the moment. And I spent a week with them in Ciudad de Mexico, and we did this project with the students called Whose Door Is This? And the idea is that you go out into your neighborhood and you find amazing doors or windows, and you think, what character lives there? And what I realized was that all these students were getting out of a car or off a bus or out of the metro, and on their way to the campus, they were doing this, and they were just looking at their phone. So they didn't even have a familiarity with Condesa or any of the neighborhoods where that were right around the campus. So just walking 2 or 3 blocks from the campus and sitting there with a sketchbook and looking at the details of the architecture was like a trip to the moon for these kids. And I'm like, this is outside your door. And when I come to Mexico, you know, the trees are different, the street signs are different, the people's faces are different shapes, the body types, the attitudes, the sounds that you hear. And I've really loved having the opportunity to connect up with the musicians and to spend time with them. Because if you go to any of the venues here, any musician that walks in with their saxophone or their drumsticks or their guitar, it's like, you know, the final part of the evening is the kind of palomazos, you know, come up and jam with us. And you get jazz musicians jamming with blues musicians, and somebody who's a DJ who's playing a conch shell, and somebody else comes in and does the double bass. And it's like, imagine if we were doing that in the animation community. Imagine if we had jam sessions for animation.
Jamming it out.
Don't you think that would be helpful?
Yes.
So yeah, once the COVID restrictions are kind of over, I love what you're drawing, by the way. I really love your artwork, and I'm sorry for disgracing myself in the top left-hand corner with this.
No, sorry. I think I just used the whole space. So.
Oh, please do, because I'm not worthy.
No.
I'll challenge you to actually, no, you won that challenge as well, because you went out to. You brought out your brush pen, and everything you did was better than mine when we went out drawing together as well. So I take that back.
Yeah, we actually we went jamming to the music gig.
That was so fun, because like I spent like 20 minutes trying to draw one guy, and you spent 30 seconds and drew everybody in the room. And I'm like, man, I'm so old and so useless. Anyway.
Don't say that.
No.
Okay.
Where was I? I'm sorry. It looks like I've given up on this, and I'm not meaning to give up on it at all. I'm just, but I have. So yeah, fire another question at me while I try and do something. While I try and rescue.
All right. Let's see. We do have another question here. Oh.
Hello to everybody. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Well, yeah, I was never given the number of the question, but it says here, besides drawing, what do you enjoy doing? Do you have any other hobbies?
I do also make music. So I get up and sing sometimes with friends of mine, and I have Ableton software installed on my MacBook. So during the quarantine period, I used to be in a band. When I was at Disney, I was in a band called the Chili Dogs, and the drummer was Dave Burgess, who animated the hyenas in Lion King. The bass player was Tim Allen, who used to animate Donald and Daisy Duck he animated them in Fantasia 2000. The guitar player was Chris Jenkins, who went on to direct Duck Duck Goose and was a huge creative force in Surf's Up. And I was the singer and keyboard player. And we recorded a kind of double album of original material and issued 500 CD copies of it. And I hadn't really written or recorded any music since then, but I bought the Ableton software to put onto my MacBook, and I have the Ableton push unit. And when the quarantine hit, I thought, well, I've put all this money into it, and I've got a vocal mic set up. I should at least try and get back to writing and recording songs. So if you go to YouTube, if my lack of drawing skill hasn't put you off entirely, if you type my name in on YouTube, you should find an archive of, I think it's about 30 songs altogether. One of them is even in Spanish, and I apologize in advance because it's in really, really ropey Spanish. But I kept writing and recording and arranging songs and putting them out on Patreon and via the Facebook page and on YouTube. And I would love to be able. I don't deserve to share screen space with an artist like Ricardo, and I don't deserve to share studio space with people like the musicians here in Guadalajara. But I would love to be able to collaborate with some of the musicians here, so that I could. What I used to love was collaborating on writing the songs as well. And I think if you get together and you start the song from a vibe or from a jam or from a rhythm or from an improvisation, it takes it in a whole new direction. Whereas if you're just sitting at home with a keyboard, it doesn't necessarily. Oh man, is that?
Yeah,
Don't say I didn't warn you. Don't say I didn't warn you. Some of them, a lot of them are very, very slow and sad, and because it's quite difficult to do fast up-tempo stuff if it's just yourself in a room. But there's a variety of different genres in there, I think.
I'm gonna start listening to that. But here is, I just put it on in Facebook and YouTube and Twitch channel.
So what's any other questions coming in?
Yeah, let's see. Do you have a creative process or something to get the creativity going?
The person that's asking the question is that like a kind of, how do you get around a creative block, or just what is your creative process each day, or?
Well, yeah, what would be? How do you prepare to create like a creative environment, maybe?
The creative process for me is so when it comes to drawing, I've been invited in lots of cases, lots of places, come in and teach people to draw. And again, you'll get this idea that the world is divided into people who can draw and people who can't draw. If you're looking at the screen at the moment, you'd be perfectly entitled to believe that that's true. The difference is the world is actually divided into people who do draw and people who don't draw. That's it. And the only bad drawing is an empty sheet of paper. The only bad drawing is a drawing that you are too scared to make. And, I've got lots of just to give you what I say, people come up to me when I'm drawing in public and they ask me lots of questions. And one of the things that I say is, una oportunidad para mí compartir mis errores con mis estudiantes. Mis estudiantes tienen miedo de hacer imágenes que no son perfectos. Y en animación todo es movimiento. Entonces, eso, por ejemplo, es un hombre en café bretón. Sin movimiento es un retrato. Is simple. So he's not moving. So, and this is another friend of mine, the very wonderful Senior Bob, Roberto Aramburu, really talented guy, and they're both keeping reasonably still. This guy is also staying still, so drawing him is much easier. But if you're drawing somebody who's playing an instrument, then there is often an enormous amount of movement while you're trying to capture what they're doing. So this guy's half his face is missing. This is Javier Villaseñor of Los Villanos Blues Band. Then I've got this guy. I just started drawing him, and he got up and walked away. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Like, don't don't ask me. This is the same thing here. I started drawing this keyboard player, and he went for a beer and never came back. This guy was partly singing at the microphone and partly standing back and playing. But if you look at how many hands there are there, and how incomplete the drawings are, how much that's not great anatomical accuracy, but it doesn't have to be, because by the time you get this far away from it, you don't really give a shit. It's like, well, if it looks roughly like, and people are so caught up in all the feedback that you get from these morons on social media that kind of go, 1,000 likes for this wonderful thing that you've done. And it means that people are relying on the kind of support of complete strangers who often know very, very little about the visual arts or whatever, but it's a dopamine hit. So I've encountered over the last few years in particular a lot of casualties of the kind of Instagram generation, where they're more concerned about producing an image that will get thousands of likes or approvals or shares on social media. But when you actually examine the images that they're making, they've come into a very early comfort zone because everyone's told them they've got to have a style. Style is just don't forget about style. Just develop craft, develop a real confidence about the things that matter. 3-point perspective, anatomy, volume, proportion, those things matter. Style, nobody in their right mind has any control over style. Style is like your handwriting. It will just be there in what you do eventually. But if you go chasing after a style or chasing after likes on social media, I think that's the opposite of a creative process. So I would say, going back to the question about what you do to sort of make yourself creative, is just sit down and actually start doing anything. And if it goes horribly wrong, like what I'm doing here, and if it goes horribly wrong in public, like what I'm doing here, this is not going to kill me. Me screwing this up is not going to be a matter of life and death. If I do a bad job of this, I'll still be here in the morning. And I think people get so terrified that everything is going to be final, and I've got to make everything perfect, and I'll never get my chosen job unless I make these kinds of images or draw that kind of subject matter. And I think the best way to be creative is to be alive. And that's why Mexico is such a great place to be, because the culture here is a very alive, vibrant culture. And you can celebrate that in all kinds of ways. But one of the best ways to celebrate it is with pencil and paper, or paints and paper, or get out there with some watercolor. And for Christ's sake, leave your phone at home. If you're going to go out and draw, leave your fucking telephone in the house. Just go out and live for a few hours without having to check social media every 10 minutes or photograph what you're doing and post it for people. Just leave your tablet, leave your computer, leave your telephone at home, and go out and enjoy yourself. Go out and live without constantly having to check your pocket. Because the other thing about learning to draw is learning to concentrate. And if everything that you're doing is interrupted every 2 or 3 minutes by checking because you've got an alert on your email or something in your phone, trust me, we lived a perfectly normal, productive life before there was such a thing as a telephone that you could take out of a house. And before there were telephones in houses, my parents' generation did perfectly well. Telephones and tablets, and I love them. They're wonderful, but please forget about them from time to time, and please leave the house without them. It's something less for somebody to steal from you if you get robbed. Just leave your phone at home and go out and draw. Trust me.
That's a
What's
really good. That's a really good. Well, but actually, that's our time.
That's the
We just
end.
that's the end. No, and actually, that answered the other question that it is about art block. But I mean,
Art block.
yeah, but
Okay.
I think that you gave us like a really good example about that. You just need to start. So
Exactly.
forget about the finding the perfect pieces or the art piece. So just you need to start. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
I think that if you feel blocked about writing or about painting or about producing music, the problem is nothing to do with your artistic or literary or musical skills. It's a psychological thing that comes up of its own accord, and it's not related to your talent or your value as a human being. It's just, sometimes we lose our appetite, sometimes we fall asleep, sometimes we need to sneeze or scratch, or shit happens.
Yeah.
But it's not the end of the world. And actually, Jim Jarmusch, the filmmaker, was the guest at the anniversary for Psy last week, and the answer he gave to this question was go out and walk. And he said movement through space is one of the best cures for creative block. And I agree with him. I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. So I'm copying Jim Jarmusch's example. Movement through space. Just go out and do something. Go and I'm living near to where the flower market is here in Alcalde Barranquitas. Walk up and down and see the people selling the flowers. Walk up and down and see, when people are in the streets where people are selling washing machines, or go and observe, live, listen, enjoy. And that will fill up your gas tank for doing other things. It's not all about us.
That is true. That is true. Well, with that, I think we ended the podcast. Fraser,
I owe you a big apology for this awful rectangular image that I've made of you. And
I love it. Actually,
everything that you put in the bottom right hand corner, it looks absolutely gorgeous. But I've spent all this money on Amazon on this fucking tablet. I've got to learn how to use it. I'm sorry for swearing, but
no, that's okay.
I now have to get my money's worth out of it. But my apologies to your audience, live and recorded, for having. It's like tune in and see what Fraser has to say about drawing, and tune in and see the worst drawing he's ever done in his life. Done live. Public humiliation by technology.
It's what you say, that you ready to start, and what we need is just practice more. That's it.
Dude, I have a whole world of practice to do with this little son of a bitch.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for the invitation. It's been great fun.
And you too.
Thank you for doing the podcast, period. Thank you for doing this live stream, because this whole idea of normalizing the drawing process, and also, actually, this is kind of what I'm always saying to people. If you're worried that there is somebody behind you looking over your shoulder going, well, that's not very good, is it? If that's what makes you freeze, or that's what makes you think I'm a worthless human being, or I mustn't do that, it's like there are some circumstances in which things go really well, and there are other circumstances like this in which you make a complete prick of yourself, and that's actually okay. It doesn't matter, because the whole thing is to give things a try, and not to be saying, okay, I'm comfortable with this. It's like, there was one point at which I thought, I wonder if I can persuade him just to let me set up a camera and I'll just do the stuff that I know I can do, and it'll all look really, really wonderful. Then I just thought, well, that's completely against the spirit of everything that I would recommend to people to do, which is take a few risks and put yourself in an uncomfortable place. And if you make an idiot of yourself, you will still be alive the following morning. Trust me.
Yes, that's actually a really cool advice. And well, you heard him, so start practicing. And
Go draw. And if you don't draw, then go out and leave.
Exactly. Live, and be kind to people as well. Be
yeah,
kind. Being kind is probably more important than being talented. Just be nice people.
yes, actually,
Underrated.
that's the way. Well, with that, I think we say goodbye to everybody, and thank you so much, Fraser, again for coming here.
My
And
pleasure.
well, we see you in another time next week.
And you have to come out drawing with me again soon.
Yes, I have to. We just keep in touch.
Yeah.
Well, see ya.
Un abrazo fuerte. Take care.
Take care.